Hello, Dr. Shannon PT with our episode of Need to Know in 5. Today we're going to be talking about motor planning. So hopefully you watched our segment last week where we were talking about container baby syndrome, and now we're going to talk about the importance of motor planning and how these two kind of go together. The first thing is motor planning. What does that mean? It refers to a skill that allows us to have in memory different motor skills. So then that way we can perform these steps over and over and over to make movement happen very naturally, kind of without thinking about it. So motor planning is a skill, and so it's important to know what is a skill. A skill is something that develops over time with lots of practice and reorganization and learning what works and doesn't work. And so that's really an important part of understanding motor planning, is that it doesn't happen overnight. It comes with practice because it's a skill that needs to be refined and developed. Motor planning is the fundamental part of both our fine and gross motor skills. So we talk a lot in child development, or you may hear a lot in child development, about how your child is doing with their gross motor and their fine motor skills and their development. But it's important to note that the motor planning is the underlying foundation to have good fine and gross motor skills. So if your child's not getting the opportunity to develop the skill of motor planning, then you're going to see impairments or deficits in their fine and gross motor skills. So let's look at an example about the importance of motor planning in your child's development in relation to baby gear, in particular container babies. If we look at the example of a child sitting in a molded foam chair, the chair is what's providing that external support to allow the child to sit. So it's not so much that the child is actively sitting themselves, it's more the chair is putting them in that position to sit. So if your child sees something on the ground, a toy, they want to be able to reach for the toy, they want to be able to move from maybe sitting to rolling or to crawling. When they're sitting in a molded foam chair, their opportunity to do that is going to be blocked because they're not going to be able to get out of the chair easily, or there's going to be a side next to them that's going to hinder or limit their movement. So they're not getting this opportunity to have this motor planning occurring, because every time the child is trying to actually engage in motor planning, it's getting stopped, blocked, or limited or hindered in some way. So it's not allowing their bodies and their minds to work together to develop these skills, because every time your baby's trying to practice this skill, it's getting blocked and not being able to do it. So this is really important when you think about how we utilize baby gear to help support our children when they're going through these developmental stages. How is it limiting their ability to practice these different skills and develop really good motor planning? If we look on the opposite side of a child who's sitting on the floor with no support, obviously safety first, making sure that all the areas and stuff are clean, but if the baby's sitting there and they see a toy and they want to go get it, now the baby can sit and they can freely move over to their side or roll to their belly and then begin to crawl to go get the toy. That is where the motor planning and the coordination and the strength and the development is all occurring, because the baby is able to engage in their natural movements and motor activities and get the natural feedback from their environment about what they did or didn't do to be successful in getting that toy. And so this is where it gets important that you're developing that skill of repetition, of allowing the child over and over and over again to problem solve, to be able to work on those motor planning skills. So a really good example of this is with sitting. When we look at children when they're first trying to sit, babies don't sit all of a sudden, right? They have to practice and get the strength and coordination to sit. So in the beginning, when their motor planning is not great for sitting, it takes them a lot of time, it takes them a lot of thought, and oftentimes that's the only thing they can think or focus on is the sitting, because that's what they're trying to do, because it's not fully developed yet. Versus when you get to a toddler age, the child should already know how to sit, right? A child goes in, they sit down, and they can start doing maybe a tabletop activity. They don't have to spend all of this time trying to figure out what their body is trying to do with sitting. So this is a really good example of a gross motor skill that if your child doesn't have optimum opportunities to practice and develop good motor planning, how it can affect them later on when they're a toddler or preschooler with something such as basic as sitting, which is so important for them to be able to sit at a table, to eat, to do different tabletop activities. If they don't have this as part of their auto programming, their time and their energy is going to have to be focused on just learning how to sit and not engaging in the other activities that they want to do. Hope you enjoyed this segment on motor planning. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time on the Need to Know in 5.